Welcome to October's series of Poetry Hour Notes from the Field. As you know, my name is Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. Um, I am the YubaSutter Poet Laureate and your contact for all things poetry. I'm joined today by the magnanimous, is that the right word? Illustrious uh, Derek Austin, who is the author of, I'm glad to have Derek back after I think a year. I think we talked first a year ago.
Yeah, like last
Um,
fall.
yeah. Um, Author of Trouble the Water, Boa Editions, and most recently Tenderness. Um, and amazing poet overall. Have you announced the thing of travel yet?
Oh,
So
the
I don't want to.
the Amy Lowell thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can
Okay. Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
a secret. It's been
So
out for months.
okay, I wasn't sure.
I've just decided to
So
please finally.
yeah. So Derek is most recently a Stegner Fellow at Stanford University. Also teaches at University of San Francisco, and is the latest recipient of the Amy Lowell Prize as a traveling scholar, where he will be overseas, staying in Europe for 1 year, working on poems, living the life. Um, and yeah, thanks, Derek, for joining us. And I want to keep it light. Tell me about Amy Lowell's, your Amy Lowell gig. Maybe we can just talk about like what your plans are for what you want to get done, or maybe that's too much pressure. But like uh, when you get into that space of I have this much amount of time to write, what you kind of hope to do with that time, because time is so precious.
For sure. It's very daunting to have like a year to just like write.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like Marcelo mentioned, I received the Amy Lowell Traveling Fellowship earlier this year, which is a prize that poets can apply, a fellowship that poets can apply for to travel outside of the continent of North America for an entire year. Um, Funded, of course. Yeah, as for what I'm doing, I'll of course be working on new poems and hopefully making some headway into what will eventually turn into book number 3, whenever that happens. But I don't think in books; I just write poems. So yeah, I'll be writing poems, and then besides that, I I'm planning to work on some nonfiction for the first time in a serious capacity. As something to do when I'm not writing poems, because I won't be writing poems the entire time, but I want something to help structure my time. And
Mm-hmm.
prose is something that I can kind of work on in a different way than a poem. Um, but yeah, I'll be writing essays about art finally. Just sort of like meditations on visual art that I admire, or meditations on poems that I like and poets that I really love. So yeah, essays and poems for a whole year, and wandering around and getting to live and breathe for a second after the continued tumult of the past several years.
Yeah, I know. That's so exciting about like getting to sit with the actual pieces that you love and seeing some of because you're going to be in Paris, so I assume you're going to go to the Louvre and see a lot of the art that I know you write about and I know you care deeply about. Um, yeah, uh, I don't know. I mean, like we talk a lot about in this place, in like this space of like poetry. But I think I was mistaken in being so embedded in poetry, even from like high school through college, through as you know. For those of you who don't know, Derek and I went to grad school together. Um, but like wish I would be like an expert on something else too. that like informs me.
Mm-hmm.
Music, I know we talk a lot about music, we talk a lot about shows, we talk a lot about other things, and that makes its way into your poems, like Beyonce, like other art. Uh, Renaissance art. You said you were into the French, surprisingly recently.
Yeah, yeah. When I was working on tenderness, like I I suddenly found out that I really like Rococo art, which I didn't know that I liked as much. So for folks who might not know, like if you think about sort of if you think about like a quintessentially French painting of like the end of the before the revolution, you sort of think about these sort of frilly, everything's pink and frilly and lacy and um
Embellished.
yeah, yeah, frivolous, sort of sweet. You think of painters like Fragonard or Watteau, Fête Gallant, these scenes of French aristocrats out in nature having a field day.
Yeah.
And it was a style of painting that I didn't much care for when I was younger because I was so self-serious, and it was like Baroque art and grand ideas about God and big ideas. And while I was working on Tenderness, which is a book in a lot of ways about friendship and about sweetness, like something that I really loved about Rococo paintings was that sense of sweetness and that sense of frivolity. Um, and the sort of uh, kind of gorgeous ambiguities of it. Like I mentioned before, Watteau is like a painter that's sort of synonymous with Rococo, and he's one of my favorite painters because something that he often does in his work is he'll do these scenes of actors, sort of commedia dell'arte, so your Harlequins and those kind of figures, and he'll do these paintings of actors out in fields, but you don't know exactly what you're looking at. So it's like, are these actors in the middle of a performance and are they characters, or is it like, are they rehearsing for a scene and it's just like people in costumes? Like you don't know what exactly is real and what's not. um and a lot of these performances are sort of like farces or amorous adventures, and it's like, you know are these people in love with each other? Are they pretending to be in love with each other? Are they actually happy? Are they actually sad? Like I was really fascinated by the blurring of those feelings, the blurrings of identities. I found really fascinating and moving. But yeah, I feel like I've wandered away from your question. I didn't even know what your question. Oh yeah, I like Rococo things now. I
Yeah,
like that.
and I mean, yeah, I could see like how we need color. I think flourishes. Um, I'm into like my jam is abstract art,
Of course.
and you don't really get a lot of that. Um, I was recently at the National Gallery, and I was trying to like, because I'm rarely at museums by myself.
Mhm.
It's either with like friends. We were just at the Exploratorium. I mean, that's kind of like a museum, but it's like more of a kids
It's a
museum. It's
natural
more like
science museum.
it's a natural science museum, and so like part of that experience is to be able to like be with somebody else and sit with that. But it was kind of really weird going to that space by myself, um, and sitting with the art, and kind of like revisiting a lot of that. And I only had like an hour before I had to take off, so it was kind of like, I mean, you can't do the National Gallery in an hour. You can't do it all like in a week
Right.
and do it justice. But I was trying to like sit there, and I was like, why do I like abstract art? Like I don't know why. Like, you know, Rothko, Newman, and all of these other. I don't like Jackson Pollock. Like I think that's overrated as well. Um, I like simplicity. Um, But as I like what the questions that you're asking, like, are they truly happy? Are they acting? Is it like a scene? And like, is the artist trying to capture that? I mean, people watching. I think we both love to do that, and even over this week, over the weekend, when you and I were together, maybe we could just tell people listening. We were in this space that I took. We were with my son and Ruby, my wife, and I think we got to like really be kids in that and not be so serious. And then the event at Litquake, called Poetry World Series, which was emceed by Daniel Handler and then judged by D.A. Powell and Danusha
The Maris.
Ramirez. Yeah. And it was really lighthearted, but also like serious. In like a way that I kind of miss. There was a lot of laughing. It was a really joyous day. I was exhausted the next day, but we really got to be kids, and we really got to like play around with bubbles and magnets and sand and kinetic stuff. Um, it's not all so serious. The music that people think that like poets are super serious, or either A, they don't know that poets are people too, or B, that poets don't really, no really poets right now. But when I get to meet poets and I get to meet like their personalities, their likes, their dislikes, what they eat. It's kind of like really fun. And like over the weekend we were at the Exploratorium, there was like a bunch of stuff that I feel like can end up in a poem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I wanted to, like at this point, and maybe it will, because there was a lot of weird stuff. What was something weird about like something that you're like or like this is really interesting.
I mean, I feel like whenever you put poets in a science space, like when we were there, like one of the things that I was thinking about was like this, like everything feels like a prompt for a poem because it's all
Hmm.
like, here's interesting facts about the way that the world operates, and it's like, um, at least for me, it's not something that I spend a lot of time necessarily thinking about. Like I'm not a science guy, but like I'm always in awe of it whenever I'm in that space, and it's like, oh my goodness, all the various complicated systems that are just happening while I'm, running errands or I'm on Zoom or whatever, and like all of these
Hmm.
forces are conspiring to like keep the world whole and moving, is so fascinating. And just like, yeah, just like the sense of sort of like taking the time to experience the world is always kind of wonderful. Like I loved all the optical stuff that we saw,
Hmm.
like that one weird mirror where it was like there's like it looks like a vanity mirror, so there's like a mirror on the left of you and a mirror on the right to you, and like the
Yeah.
mirror on the left was like a regular mirror, and it's like you look and it's just you. But then the mirror on the right is like it was like a double mirror, so it was like a reflection of a reflection, and basically
Hmm.
it was meant to recreate the effect of what you look like to other people. So it's like you looking at you the way that the world sees you. And it's like, oh, that's very disorienting and disturbing.
It was
Um,
unnerving.
right. It's like, oh, like this is just like the face that people see. And like that's the thing you don't often think about. But then like all the other cool, like all the mirror that refuses to reflect you. And then there's like that one sort of like digital display that was like, I forget what it's like, an Einstein something, but it's like the effect of like when you're like in a black hole and like your image sort of like
Hmm.
elongates and alters. And it's like
Hmm.
thinking about the ways that you know it's not like science is so like here's like the definitive facts of how the world works, but then it's like you look at something else and it's like if you change around things and like this is how the universe works. um it's like it's a site of endless possibility in the way that poetry is and the way that painting is.
Yeah.
I think that's why poets always respond to science, and you'll always see like somebody's writing a poem about a gravitational force or or the laws of thermodynamics or, you know, all of that good stuff because it's rich, you know.
The metaphors are there. Like I do remember that mirror that I don't know if the mirror refuses to show a reflection, but like it doesn't. Like
Yeah,
it
it's like
doesn't.
it's angled in such a way. It's not
That
self-conscious to my knowledge.
it's
It's not
let's
self-aware yet.
let's pretend the mirror is self-conscious and it refuses. Like the
I mean,
prompts
like
are
that's the
there.
thing too. Like all the mirror poems that people write, like that's like that's the thing, like right there.
Right. And like, so the metaphors are there of, okay, so if it doesn't reflect you, what does it reflect? It reflects like what was behind you, or reflects like what is in your immediate surroundings, but not you. And I try to tell my students this all the time. It's like, if you're kind of attentive and like looking for that phenomenon, it doesn't have to be at a natural science museum. Um, and like it's those small moments that even though this whole science museum was like based on science and like documenting, recording evidence and trial and error and all of these things, and that there was like so much mystery and intrigue in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like when this one stone kind of half circle, you can talk to somebody on the other side of the room and you could hear only them, and you can like have a chit chat. And I was talking with Julian, my son. It's weird to say Julian, my son, because you know who Julian is, but for us, if you're in an audience, um, and kind of just having a conversation from like very far away. Um, like there's science behind that, there's facts behind that, there's an explanation behind that. But there's like, I think we're not satisfied with like a rational explanation. We always try to make these not more confusing, but like um, look at the mystery behind that, or anything like that. There was at the very end a face that was upside down, and we our eyes like really can't comprehend an upside down face. Like the eyes were
Right.
like turned around.
It was very weird.
It was so weird. So you could like turn it around and keep turning it, but like it just didn't make sense. Like your eyes just could, or your brain could not comprehend what it was seeing. And like there's a explanation for that, obviously, but that doesn't mean there isn't like a mystery to it, or that we can like propose something in our poems about that and use that as a way of like understanding ourselves a little bit more. um, so yeah, that's kind of like, you're gonna be overseas for a year, and so being put into scenarios, into situations, into spaces, that are right ripe for where to begin a poem. But even there, in your own apartment at your own desk, like that poems can happen even in the smallest of places. um, I had a prompt yesterday with my students of logging what they do during the day, and it's based off of this poem by C.D. Wright called "Living," where she's like, if it is Wednesday, take the trash out. If it is Wednesday, pick up library books, go to the pharmacy to get meds, remind so and so about this, and it was like very of like the mundane, quotidian, everyday kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like my students are always saying like, I need to have a big story, I need to have
Right.
like something spectacular, I need to have something big to say. And it's like, no, even if you do, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good book or a good book of poems, or anything like that, or a good poem.
Right.
It's what you do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's sort of why now now's the time that I want to write nonfiction. I mean, besides the fact that like
Mm.
I have a year, in the sense that like I I feel like I'm mature enough as a writer where I don't feel like I need a big idea in order to justify writing. You know, I feel like one of the reasons why I was so nervous about writing nonfiction for a long time is that I felt like everything had to be up to 100, you know, like I feel like the
Right.
language needed to be at like 100, and like,
Everything there.
you know, like everything had to be like, you know, deeply researched, and like everything needed to be at a maximum in a way that I don't think anymore. Like I don't feel like I have to write like big ornate sentences in my prose. I don't feel like I have to you know, necessarily have a big fancy idea. You know, I'm just interested in writing towards surprise and letting my mind drift and seeing what connections happen, you know, because like another reason I'm interested in doing this too is like, as a poet, I've been thinking a lot about ambition, as I tend to do, and like what does that mean for me right now? Like what does it mean to write an ambitious poem for me at this point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and that can mean so many things. Like there's subjects that I have never written about, and like that's ambitious, right? Like there are
Mm-hmm.
ways that my poems have never been shaped before, and that's ambitious. And like one thing for me that is ambitious and something that always drives me up the wall is like long poems. Like I've always been like, it's always been hard for me to wrap my head around how like I can write a long poem, because I don't tend towards that. And when I
Mm-hmm.
do, they tend to be like in sequences.
In
Um,
sequence, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't like know how to like sustain a long thing. And so that's also why I'm really interested in writing essays in as like an experiment in learning how to sustain a thought, um and even more than sustaining it, like being able to be flexible with it and sort of playful with it, and letting your mind wander, because I think I'm like a very straight line kind of thinker, like A to B. And I want to see what happens if I like go to like A 22 before I go to B. You know what I mean? Like if I can like make stops along the way, you know, what
Yeah.
happens if I like linger and luxuriate,
Right.
and like prose would give me space to do that in a way that I don't think a poem.
Meander. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meander and contemplate and meditate, and not necessarily, like you said, be at 100 for each and every moment, because that's like a lot of pressure. I think that's like what a lot of people um, are daunted when like something isn't working. It's like because it's not at 100 all of the time, or you have to feel pressure to be at 100. Um, and some of the books that I'm teaching right now that are memoirs and that are essays kind of like really do that. There isn't like some grand point to make. One book that I just taught this week, Rachel Zucker, um, Sound Machine, and like it's from Wave Books, and Wave is like, you know, there'll be Wave. Um, but it was just kind of nice to get students reactions that it's like, oh, this is of the everyday, and this isn't necessarily um, she says it like, is there, she says it in the book because she questions it herself, like, is there emotional truth or technical virtuosity? And like the ambitions that you talk about, I think a lot of the times it's like towards technical virtuosity, like
Right. Mhm.
um, towards a complicating of language. But sometimes it's just a scenario. It's just a scenario, the situation that is where the poetics is at. Not necessarily how you say it, but just the fact that you were there, um, and just the fact that we were in a natural science museum while military jets were flying above, um,
Mhm.
in formation for Fleet Week in San Francisco. Um, and kind of like, what are they called, like military shows or
Like air shows, I think, is what you call
yeah,
them.
air shows, yeah, but it's also like showing the military might, right?
Right. Like that's like the detail in an essay that's like would make it for me. Like it's not the exploratorium in that moment. It's like observing the fact that there are these jets that like that it's Fleet Week and there are jets in the air. Like that's like for me as like a writer and a reader, like that's the detail that like I would be like, yes, like that feels like rich and lived in and
Hmm.
particular. And it, like you said, it says so much about like where we're at in a particular moment in
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And it doesn't mean that like the essay has any less risks or that it's any less technical or anything like that. But I think yeah, that space, which is why like sometimes we write poetry because we want to like compact everything into that one small space and have everything charged.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I would love to write a book that meanders. Um, and I know a bunch of books that do that, but I feel like I don't have the courage to do so, or I feel
And
like it
you say having
will.
wrote a whole memoir, a whole lyric memoir, like you've already done this.
Yeah, yeah, but like
But I
that
see
was
what
also
you
very
mean.
intentional. Like that was very intentional. Even like in its meanderings, it was intentional. Its meanderings to like create a particular effect.
Right, right.
It was very like crafted in a way that that like will recreate a particular emotion. Um, and not to say that like I want to write something that is unedited because I would never like but to like be given the chance to explore without so many voices in my head.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Um,
it,
like like for me, like an essayist that I've been thinking about a lot, especially in regards to this thing that I'm about to attempt to do, um, is this book called Looking at Pictures by Robert Walser,
mm,
um, who was like a late 19th, early 20th century Swiss writer. And in Looking at Pictures is like a collection of essays about visual art that he likes. And like they're not written from the point of view of an expert or like an art historian. It's just like a guy who likes to look at art. Um,
yeah,
which I find really moving and beautiful. But the way that he writes about them is just like as something that's embedded in his day. He'll like write about like I went on a walk and I had lunch at this place and I was thinking about rent and I was thinking about this Van Eyck painting that I really like and like here's me talking about it. And then he goes back to like going on his walk and he goes home and he talks to his landlord. And like that's the sort of meandering that I want to try and write. And I think like the meandering that we've been talking about, where it's like, and it's funny because it's like we say it's meandering because it sort of is, but it's also just life.
yeah,
Like that's the feeling that art has for me. Like it's not like this sort of vaunted sort of ceremonial thing for me. And like part of it is like I've been fortunate to like live in places where I can go to museums regularly and things like that. But you know, I think about old paintings in the same breath that I think about RuPaul's Drag Race or like hot dudes in movies. It's just a part of my existence.
yeah.
You
It
know?
doesn't exist like separate
Right.
from from it. And I think I was that way at one point, and I'm kind of like also nearing more of that of like the observations that I make on a daily basis, and at one point I was like after kind of we both departed from Ann Arbor, I was thinking like, where do I go that's most conducive for my art, or where can I write? Where can I write from? And when I moved back here, there was a bit of a moment of despair. It's like, can I write the small moments here? And I think now I think I can. Um, and it's more precise actually than being elevated in at a level that is distance from like it's more precise to me. It's more accurate to how I really, and that's kind of like Frank O'Hara, right? Taking walks, looking at art, taking walks around New York City. Of course, he was the director of MoMA, and he had like he was brushing up with the with artists and living that kind of um, life. But there's like there's meaning in like the smallest of moments. And yeah, like that book that you mentioned. I want to read it now, and kind of see how is it meant like, am I writing right now with the intention of publishing, or can I write something that won't? I don't think I can write something without the intention of publishing in the long scope. Maybe at the moment of, I'm like, oh, I don't know what this is, and maybe it's not going to be a thing. But the more I look at it, I'm like, okay, this can be a thing, with the intention of publishing. And I feel like people, there's like some shame in that. It's like, oh, everything now has to be about being published, but um, that's a way that like I validate myself with, I don't want to like admit to that.
But it's
But
real
again,
though. It's like, I think that's, I think that's one of the other reasons why it's taken me forever to actually do nonfiction. Because like with a poem, like I can spend time on a poem, and like if it doesn't work, then like it's fine. Like, I don't have to publish it. It's whatever. But like I feel like if I spend time working on an essay, for example, and it just like sits there, like sure, like I've learned things and like it's good for me personally, but it's also like, oh, I like my fear is like, oh no, I've wasted this time, and it's like, what do I do with this thing, this piece of prose I've spent forever on,
yeah,
And I don't know. It's rough. It's weird. I don't know why I feel that way about prose as opposed to a poem, because it's like it takes me forever to write poems too. But like I feel like if I don't finish one, it's not the end of the world, and if it's not published, it's whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
also because like we're older, like because we've had poems published before, so it's like, I have stuff in the archives, like we have things that are there. Like when I was younger, I feel like it's something that stressed me out a lot. Like as a baby poet, is like, oh no, I've like wasted my poem, and now no one really knows who I am.
yeah. Like, but I'm glad that we're able to have these conversations. I think that's good. I mean, I could go on and talk forever,
I
as you
know, like
know.
I'm just like, can we just like keep talking? Like let's just like let's just keep hanging out.
Like about music, we were just listening to this one. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it got me all into my feelings, by Jeanette Ritual Chants, L'amour joue au violon.
Oh, the
I was
French
listening to,
song.
yeah, I was listening
That
to
one was
Kylie
cool.
Minogue,
I like that one.
Cuco, Lo que siento. I think I sent it to you too.
That was great.
I know, right? And
I
it's
loved
it's
all of
like,
those.
this is like our daily life, and it's, yes, stuff ends up on the page, but like this is actually more of my life than poetry is. Um, because like the actual what's on the page is maybe like 1% of the entire lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more, just because we're in too deep. um, um, but yeah, the rest, even if it was like 20%, that's still 80% of your life that is lived. So hopefully, maybe when you're in Paris and Madrid and somewhere in the UK also, we'll see each other there, have a coffee. Well, you don't like coffee, but have a pastry, go see some art, take a walk, um, and like let that be like our thing. Um, yeah. Well, this has
Yeah.
been fun.
It's always great talking to you.
I know. Thank you so much. Yes, if you're just joining us, if you started 15 minutes into it, if you started from the beginning, thank you for tuning in. Again, our guest today, dear friend of mine, Derek Austin. Take a look at his recent publications, Tenderness, out from BOA Editions 2 years ago.
Last year.
Last year, geez. Yeah, and I'm always excited to have these conversations. Any readings that you have maybe coming up?
No, I've got nothing on the calendar. So if folks want
we
me, send me an email. Let's work something
well,
out.
Derek Austin. Take a look at the socials. You can find him there to come visit your class, your organization, so on and so forth. I'm always championing your work. So okay, cool. I'm gonna end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.